Sure.
What a day. Good afternoon.
Yeah, it must be for you.
Why is that?
Because you have a guest in the city of Amsterdam. Must be nice to have a guest in the city of
I
Amsterdam.
love having this guest.
That's nice.
So today, Andy, we have a friend of mine,
We do.
Yannick Heinrich.
Yannick Heinrich.
we asked him several times how to pronounce the last name.
Yeah.
So if we fucked it up, he'll let us know when he comes on.
No, I think that was an okay pronunciation, but he has another hyphen in there that we didn't include. It just got too long and too complicated. We're going to talk to him about having trouble making male relationships, and we're going to do that for the hour on
Wonderful kiss. It's another day in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Broadcasting from the 9 streets.
Center of the city, Jordan.
In the church room, as this room is so called, on the Berenstraat number
7 in Amsterdam. Could we be any more
specific
than that? Now we got
Well, interesting enough, if you come to this building, you see, when you enter, you'll see photographs as soon as you enter the building.
Yeah.
That this room was actually a classroom.
Yeah.
When it was founded back in 1830.
It's true. The room we're now sitting in is the first kindergarten in the country.
Yeah.
So if you look at pictures from 1830, what you see is a classroom of kids, because the kindergarten was founded by Quakers. And so they're all dressed in their Quaker garb. And we would be sitting kind of like in between where the students were sitting and where the teacher was right now.
Yeah.
It's a magnificent space. We're lucky to have use of it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Bambos, this is a interesting topic from your friend Yannick.
Well, I would say friend, and I would say it's someone who's quite new in my life. We've actually spent a little bit of time together.
What's going on here? You're distancing yourself from Yannick. He's not even on the show.
Yeah, of course I am.
I wouldn't call him a friend. He was an acquaintance.
Slow down before you get excited and all.
Have fun.
So I have a second company, as you know. It's called basetraining.nl.
Yeah.
Yannick was one of the people that joined in the beginning when I was just offering and testing it out. He was one of the guinea pigs, and he gave me really nice feedback.
Oh, sweet.
And, on that journey, I saw that there was vulnerability, and we had breakfast together. On the breakfast, this subject came up.
Oh, nice.
So we were having a very deep conversation, very vulnerable, and in some respect, I would say loving and gentle. And in that, he had to acknowledge that, wow, this is something that I yearn for in my life. It's difficult, and he doesn't always know how to create it. That was pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow. So would you like to talk about this on a podcast? Fast forward, what is it now? 3-4 months later, we are here with him.
And he says this isn't really an issue for him at the moment, but it's still worth talking about.
Yeah.
And we'll see if it's an issue. A lot of times people say it's not an issue because they've figured out something, but it still might be an issue somewhere. So we'll see if there's still
Well, I want to know why he's not hanging out with me.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's in Barcelona right now, so that could be one reason.
How are you with male friends? I mean, I know you hang out with me a lot.
Because I was much more sensitive as a kid, most of my friends were females. And what I noticed was that I wasn't into the macho thing. Like I wasn't really interested in cars and in the things that were more masculine. Football either. No, I mean, I played, but it wasn't like that didn't give me my excitement. And what I noticed is that there's a camaraderie that comes when you share the gridiron sports, so these sort of more bonding rituals almost.
Yeah.
So if you don't get into that as much, then there's something that you float around a little bit more because you don't find the groups that bond around that sort of thing. So I didn't. So I had a lot of female friends, and I had crushes on a lot of the female friends, but I was always too anxious to say anything because I always felt uncomfortable. Like,
It's called you were friend zoned.
no, I don't necessarily know if I was friend zoned. Actually, I mean, in retrospect,
I love the no.
well, I mean, the truth is that they would be really close friendships, and I'd always say I don't want to mess it up. So I never really thought that it was that it might not have been also reciprocated. It was very much more like I'm a bit shy, and I could imagine if I went back to them and said, "Hey, I thought you were attractive," they might have also said the same in that time. Yeah, because it was a very, there was two sides to it. There was that side of I'm sensitive, and I see that when I say the things that are in my head to the male friends, they kind of look at me and make grunting noises like, "Why are you overthinking and thinking so much?" Like that's often a response I would have. And then of course when you're with the females, then you're more sensitive. And then the humor is I didn't even realize that was in some ways more appealing to the females at that time. I'm not even sure if that's true or not, to be honest with you. I think in college and high school, there's still an attraction to this masculine, to the machismo in the men, right? I think people graduate out of that as they get older.
Yeah, you would hope that.
Yeah. But how was it for you? Because you also have obviously a more softer nature. So how was it for you in Cyprus?
Well, my culture is very macho.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, it was really difficult for me to find connection in general just because I didn't have that connection growing up. So in order for me to make friends, I would often lie. I create these huge stories.
Wow.
And kind of, we weren't very wealthy, so I would create stories that my uncle was some National Geographic explorer somewhere in the world, and I was connected to him, imaginary uncle, by the way. And people would eventually discover, and I get bullied, I get beaten up, name calling and shaming, and I only realized, oh wow, like underneath all those stories, I just wanted love and connection.
Yeah.
I wanted to be cool. Like a guy would come to school and he'd be wearing back then the Reebok pumps.
Yeah. You remember it.
And everyone would be looking, like admiring these. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Hey, Dad, can I buy Reebok pumps?
No.
And then we go and I get these little flimsy trainers. So I would say I was a really try hard, and I just didn't have anything for friendship. And there were a couple of people in school that were sensitive. Later on, I discovered that they were gay, and they tend to be my friends. Back then. Yeah. So they were more towards the gentle and loving.
It's funny because both of us have a predominant of gay friends in our lives, and interestingly, I've often associated with the two qualities: one, higher level of sensitivity at that age, and the other was that they had overcome something that was challenging and built character. So I really saw that was something that I had a lot more of in my own life. I think it's similar for you.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be great to bring Yannick on and sort of dig into his. How does it feel to have Bambos say, "Hey, he's an acquaintance twice removed"?
I would say that Bambos knows exactly that. It might have been just once or twice, but when a connection is sparked, it is what it is, and you just take it in the moment. So I really recognize that in Bambos. I recognize that sensitivity, and when I remember, Bambos, you're a very hugging person, and I am too, and so that was like a very like a very easy, like, hey, I like hugs too. Like, give me more of that, Vamos. So
Yeah.
that was a good first encounter. Again, Vamos is a great trainer that focuses a lot on the rhythm you have in your own set, with your own self, with your own body. And you know, as he said, I was a guinea pig and a feedback giver, and very happy at that. So it was a good encounter. Thanks,
What
Vamos,
were
again.
your first impressions of Bambos when you met him?
Be careful, because this might define the future of our
Why
friendship.
is he crying? Why is he crying all the time? Because Vamos, for those that don't know this, I mean, I'm sure you've mentioned this on your podcast, but Vamos tears up a lot. And so it makes his brilliant eyes look even more deep and emotional. And so it's quite the impression.
We've never talked about it on the show, by the way. 255 episodes. We've never discussed that, actually. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that forward. Yeah.
Do you want to do a show?
Maybe it was because it was 5 a.m. and we were, yeah.
No. I would say that it's living in Holland, my eyes are quite watery. But when I was in Cyprus for 3 weeks, I discovered that in Cyprus, my eyes are not watery. So somewhere in the climate of the Netherlands, it really impacts my eyes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I always associated the tears with some discussion we were also having.
You know, I had a lot of theories, but when I went to Cyprus, like, oh, apparently this is not happening in Cyprus.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking. I thought maybe the bike, the wind in my eyes, but I was riding a bike in Cyprus.
Wow.
So Yannick, my first question to you is why didn't you hang out with me again, man?
Yeah.
I really looked for you, and I was thinking, like, it hurt my heart.
Oh, really?
You are such a bastard, Bambos. Look at him. He's
Probably.
squirming in the chair.
Look at me. I'm just looking for answers. There was no specific reason. Almost. I was very happy to encounter you again by chance when you returned from your travels, and happy that you gave some space for the breakfast we had at your place, and we'll find time for it again when I'm back.
Yeah, you look like you're really. I mean, I also know you've been traveling a lot. You were in Mexico, you came back, now you're in Barcelona. So it looks like you're really not in one place.
With the pandemic and the amount of time and like space we had to think about what our priorities were, I found that one of them would be to take chances when they come to you sometimes. And a good friend of mine from Mexico was in Barcelona for a few days, and so I decided to take the plunge and go meet her and her boyfriend and some of their friends here.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when I think of friendship or relationships in general, my brain always goes back to parents and how I relate to my parents. And I'm wondering if you feel like, what was the connection between your papa, you and your mama?
It's good that you call it papa, because that's exactly how I call my parents, right? Maman for my mom in French, and papa of Dutch for my dad. I would say my mom and I always had a more explosive relationship, understood each other on a deep level, I would say an emotional level. And I would say my father was, I would say, more of, in my childhood at least, a figure that I cared more to impress, perhaps, or to be more present around. But again, you see your parents evolve, you see your parents age, and you see their own vulnerability. And so I don't know how much I can refer to my past images without them being tainted by my present ones. So I grew up with parents that were supportive and wanted me to just be happy, be well with myself. We both refer to things that I identified with. Again, my reflex of saying, oh, this is not an issue I have anymore, is, of course, it is an ongoing thing, how we relate to others. Also, in my childhood, I felt I had some issues I had to overcome that made me more sensitive. And you both refer to things that I that I identify with. Also, growing up in Mexico, just like you grew up in Cyprus, Bambos, you see a lot of these archetypes of man that are reflected in young boys, and of course also on women. But yeah, I don't let me get lost here.
Did you consider yourself sensitive as a kid?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say I definitely was.
And how did that manifest? Like, what would we have seen in you that you would have made clear that you were sensitive?
I think I was
question.
I was a very curious child, and I saw a footage once of mine where I'm explaining how impressed I was by some pyramids we had seen in the jungle in Chiapas in the southeast of Mexico, and the way my eyes are sparking as I explain why I'm impressed, why I thought, I was impressed by the monkeys and so on. I think I was always a very curious and very dreamy child, and I wanted to find people who I could express this with, and that was not so easy for me when I changed countries, when I moved to Mexico from Switzerland, and definitely when you're 10, 11 years old and you're trying to fit in and you find yourself without friends, you notice that you feel weak, and you feel your sensitivity is a disadvantage, and that I think is a really, really difficult situation to be in as a young boy. Like, then you go through puberty and you're wondering, okay, what sort of models can I model myself? Can I guide as I become more mature, and you might not even have a reference of what a sensitive man is, and so you try to toughen up, you try to stand your ground. I think in schools, I also developed like layers of that I thought were like complex, scary, whatever. You try and figure it out, and definitely I would say also always been really into music, and I like art. I like the sensitive. I like the appreciation of beauty, of inner feelings of others. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you speak, I'd say that there's a lot of us in the world that we're very sensitive as kids, and our environments were more, at least in my case, were more nurturing towards the more masculine way of archetypal living. So encouraged to get in sports. And so, I enjoyed art and I enjoyed music.
Saxophone player.
That came in time. But there were things that I was attracted to.
Yeah.
And what I saw was that in a way, there wasn't as many people in those groups. So like you say, you're a bit more alone, because I think what I also mentioned earlier, when you're more macho and you're in more macho groups, that's a natural defense. Because there's power in numbers when you're young, and if the numbers are also aggressive, then you feel a sense of strength that doesn't come from you, but it comes from the group that you've just put yourself in.
And they give you plenty of validation, right?
Plenty of validation. Yeah.
For sure. I remember feeling threatened in my self-image of what a young man should be, and I remember like violence boiling up in me, and luckily I have friends who have warned me, who have reminded me over the years. I have a sister who has, now that I have an ear to tend to her, who has starkly reminded me of how things used to be and how this would boil up in me, and it's not a healthy ground to live in. So I've asked myself what a better model could be, what a more sensitive, embracing model could be for a child.
And this is getting to another point, which is very much connected to this, is we've discussed a lot on the show about polarity, and when you repress a certain emotion or when you don't allow it to live freely, that it then flips and you have another expression. So for me, and it was similar for you in our discussions, and I imagine for you, that in being more sensitive, how was it then when you did your flip to now being aggressive and defensive? Where did that show up in your life?
I think there's been many flips, right? There was a flip where I realized that that it was okay to be sensitive and to show that to others. I think one of the most significant flips, well, I would say a recent flip, was when I was living in Beijing and I was going to Renmin University for an exchange program. And during that time, I had just left. I was studying in the UK at the University of Warwick, and my second year there was a mixed experience. I was trying to find myself with activities. I was going through a period where I was asking myself, what is right to eat? How should I behave in society? I tried veganism for a while, and it didn't resonate at all with the people that I was seeing at work. I didn't surround myself with people that were receptive to this. So I left Warwick with this impression of, well, here's me, and I can try this anew in China. And in China, here I was trying to, seeing myself as in a new skin, and I find myself judging another guy called Simon, who was the most sensitive man I had met thus far. He was the most sensitive man I had met thus far. He was full of emotion. He would embrace me, and I found myself a little bit defensive in his presence, a little bit. He did one thing once where, and I think this is a fantastic story. I don't know if you ever hear this, but he came into my bedroom. He asked me if he could turn off the light, and it was pitch dark, and he sat in front of me, and we talked about how we felt and how our semester was going in pitch darkness. I don't even know how he came to this idea, but it was very interesting to me, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting that I feel uncomfortable in this presence. And then one day we are coming back, and it's New Year's Eve, and we've just partied a long night in Beijing. This is 2013, maybe a little bit more, maybe a bit more liberal than it would be now. Not sure. And we're back at the university, and the sun is rising, and we're dancing, and he joins us, and I look at him, and his eyes are full of tears, and he thanks me for being there. And I remember feeling like, this guy understands something that I don't understand, or I didn't understand before, and he's sharing this love with me now. And it was a very insightful moment for me, where I came to understand that I was capable of loving, and I was capable of receiving love. And I think the latter is even more important, because maybe the reason I was judging him was that I didn't see myself as worthy of that sort of affection. I felt inadequate in that moment, and this was a really important lesson for me. And I think that I now give to people not similar, but my own kind of love, in a way that I believe is true to my inner feeling, and makes me feel comfortable, makes me feel good. And so I thank people like Simon, who taught me very positive forms of love and affection. And that's one positive switch. If you want to, we can talk about the switch that happened more in my childhood, when I decided to become what I saw as a tougher version of myself, even though, obviously fragile. But
I think when Andy asked the question about a flip, it's when we suppress something, then we kind of get the opposite effect. Am I right?
It was, but I didn't care. He answered it a whole nother way, and I'm kind of on the flow of the answer.
Nice.
You had a few things that, as you spoke, that came up for me. Interestingly, is that how do you navigate this sensitivity? Because I've found, at least in my life, that since I've been more sensitive, male relationships can be challenging, because males will think that I'm gay, or they'll hope that I'm gay, or they'll try to flip me to gay because they're thinking, oh, he doesn't know it yet. I mean, I've got friends from like high school that probably would say he's gay, he just doesn't know it yet. So the question for you is, how is that for you?
Yeah, I think embrace that, like, people cannot, like, as long as you're not being explicitly sexual, which I don't think you are, otherwise you wouldn't be surprised by the reaction. You know what you're emitting, you know what message you're giving. And if that message is a loving one and one of affection, you can clearly mark your boundaries in a way that doesn't have to be so stark. It can be a simple, I really appreciate you, and that is not synonymous to I want to sleep with you. And you know, the reason people might see that as gay is maybe they're not used to someone who likes women appreciating another man as much. But I think that that is not your direct concern until it becomes, of course. Then you need to, you know, create some distance. But it has happened to me too, and I used to be conflicted by it as well. And I spoke to a friend of mine who self-described himself as the gayest straight man, and I think like it's all a blur, you know. And it's not so much about what you are, but it's about what you're bringing out there, what you're open to, and what you're when you tell yourself when you tell yourself you're open to surprises and you're open to growing, what does that mean for you? You know, I've I've never been as such per se attracted to men, but I've always told myself that I'm not one to control that. You know, there's nothing there to control. It's just what we emit. And so I think that the way I deal with this is that in most cases I take it as a compliment that someone appreciated this energy. If it depends, if it's more of a, or this intention, whatever you want to call it, and if it's more of a thing that you need to create, or you need to help someone understand that it's not sexual, I think it's also good to explicitly say that. It's not taboo.
Yeah.
How
But
is it for you,
I
Yannick?
appreciate that, because it's certainly something that when you said that you had friends that were gay or were more effeminate and so on, I understand that it's not always obvious to be very sensitive at an early age and to express that freely. And so I really admire the men and the women who are expressing their whatever they find themselves to feel at the moment, to fully express that.
When it comes to expressing love to your male friends, and let's say you've got your more sensitive male friends and you've got the more macho, you know, they might not be so in tune with their sensitivity, but you love them just because of how they stand in the world. But so how do you, what happens for you when you want to express love in these two domains and anything in between?
I mean, you might know this from Cyprus, but in Mexico, it's quite a stereotypical macho society with just an incredible amount of gender-based violence and so on. A lot of the men that proclaim to be or self-identify as very manly and would be uncomfortable with the idea of talking about their own sexuality, whatever. If you tell them something related to their anus or their testicles, they will get sensitive and very uncomfortable. But if you give them a few tequilas, they suddenly start slapping you and they start hugging you and holding you so close, and they end up all embraced drunk. And it's like, okay, like you just had to have a bit of alcohol to get rid of your barriers. But I think deep inside it's all a blur. Like there's those that are so keen to identify as not something. There's a reason for that too. I think it's identity that you can get stuck with. I think that you can choose not to identify as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you guys feel about that?
I had another story in my head, so I lost my own path on this.
I think for me, if I really feel appreciation for a brother, I don't per se adjust myself. Like I'll tune into in the moment what I feel grateful for, and most of the time that gratitude might be hand in hand with tears, and I'll share it with them. And I have male friends that I see will sit in front of me, looking at me. Thanks, man. Thanks, man. And I in that moment I don't need them to be anything more than that or less. Like I feel really grateful that they're there for me, and there's this, I can share that with them, and they don't need to respond in the same way. And I just see an incapacity, and it's okay. But the fact that they stay in my life, and sometimes I get a message in a few months, like, hey man, thought about you, hope you're good. That's their way, and I'll fully receive that as the love. And yeah, I do have other friends where if I share it the same way, they're like, come here man, I want to hug you, and like, it's so nice to receive this.
Yeah, I was thinking that I have a lot of friends that it'll depend. Like if I go back to my high school and college, if I see them, then there'll be a hug, which is sort of like kind of let our shoulders meet a little bit and then tap each other on the back. You know, the
So your crotches don't touch.
yeah, oh, for sure not. Yeah. That would be unacceptable. Like it would just be too, there would be none of that loving embrace because that would just be like inviting too much connection. So I've seen that a lot in most of the circles that I've been in, is that there's far more of a, we're gonna touch, but we'll touch in a way that you feel safe. And it's funny because I would be more touching and more affectionate. And what I also saw was that, like in work, I remember walking up to my secretary and just touching her on the shoulders and thanking her. But like for me, without any sexual thought, like, thank you, I'm so appreciative of what you're doing. And that was a really big deal, right? Because that could have been misinterpreted, and I didn't even think about it because my intentions were clear in me, although I didn't realize that they were processed differently by the receiver.
Yeah.
So that also changed a little bit of my perspective of like, even if this is how I show affection, I'm very conscious that everyone has their own way of receiving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard him say "I love you" to clients.
What do you mean?
Oh,
I always say I love you to clients. Yeah.
I love you, and it's really beautiful when I hear that.
Andy, I think on this topic, it's something that has, for me, like struck me deeply, is that you learn how you connect and you learn your own depths, and you start, perhaps that only happened to me, but I started expecting people around me to reciprocate to that depth and intensity of connection. And I think that is part of a problem that I think men need to talk about as well, is that if you're becoming sensitive and if you're becoming more in tune with yourself, that doesn't mean that is what other people want to receive, or it also shouldn't come with the assumption that someone will feel comfortable with exactly that intensity. So what Bambos was saying about being in tune with others, I think is very important, because hey, like I barely have any, like, I'm experimenting how flexible I am with my own barriers, and that doesn't mean that someone else that I'm talking to has exactly the same code or the same way of looking at the same problem. So I think there's also a space for growth in knowing how to hold your space and allow for the very simple connection, perhaps eye contact, or action, or like certain gestures to express that entire love that you might want to express. But it's just an opening to it instead of always being full on, which I think that I have a tendency to be a bit, a bit much sometimes for some, and for others, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm trying to receive, and I'm getting that. But sometimes I think it's important to put others first too, when you're interacting them, like trying to understand what their language of love is.
Yeah, it's one thing I think there again, I'll always pull from the idea of the arrogance of thinking that one way is better than another way, and it's humorous because I think for years, especially when I kind of went, and found the mentor who was then teaching me, and then I started feeling like all these type of interactions are better than any other interactions. So it was very much like, this is the interactions I want in my life, and if it's not that, then these people, either get out of my life or, so it's a very, it was like that restless,
I know better,
but not even stated openly. So it is this quiet arrogance. So I can certainly relate with that moment when you realize everyone gets to decide how they want to relate with the world, and I get to decide what I want more of. And I kind of see that in my now life is I get to invite people, and if they don't come to be and share in that space, then that's just their prerogative, as it was my prerogative to invite them and for them to decide for themselves. And I think what I've seen is I've alienated fewer people when they haven't met me, because before I would have been like, even if it was subtle, it would have been a bit about them. It would have been a little bit like, you're not able to, right. Sometimes I'll hear when you say that, and that'll trigger me slightly. It's light. It's not a heavy one, but I'll feel it sometimes when we'll talk.
When I'm talking about women.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, yeah.
He's been mirroring me on that. Yeah. Like sometimes I'll say, "Oh, I'm not attracted to this anymore." And he's been inviting me to talk about more of what I want. And when you share what you want, it means you don't point the finger at people when they don't match that, and it's just a more loving way of communicating. And he's been fine tuning me.
Just in the nod.
It's funny also because I have a male friend also who I didn't see for a year and a half because of COVID, actually 3 years, so just before COVID. And I'm like, hey, shall we have a video call? So we're having a video call and we're talking, and at some point he's like, Bambos, why did you reach out? Because he thought there was a purpose, or I wanted something from him.
Yeah.
And in that moment when he asked me, I started crying, and I just said, because I love you. And I saw that when I couldn't hold that back or deny it. And then I saw him relax into the conversation, because he has a position as a leader in the world of what he does. So a lot of people will call him because they need something from him always. And from him was like, I love you. Just the joy, and I missed you. That's it.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
When
you were saying about fine tuning, what you were saying about fine tuning, it's your friends fine tune you, and your environment fine tunes you in some ways. And what I found is that in that interaction with them, when you're hearing feedback, or when you see them act in ways that you find inspiring, is when you get to know yourself too. And so it's always very simple to give gratitude, because they provide so much of a mirror, or so much of a reflection as well.
Yeah, Nick, you're in the way. There's a guy throwing darts.
I love the fact we're watching a dart match go on behind you right now. It's very fascinating.
I mean, it's good. It's good for those people that, we're looking for a different kind of answer. They can find a different type of entertainment here.
That's fantastic.
I'm not. I'm in a lounge that provides but doesn't sell other types of products.
Oh,
including Fritz. What's it called? Fritz the brand.
Cola.
Yeah, well, that's a lemonade.
Including, yeah. But I can reposition my camera if you want. I can sit on a bench with a white background.
We're loving this.
We love it.
There was no undercurrent message like you need to move.
Good.
It's a really fun backdrop.
I was thinking when you were talking, I once about a month ago, one of my favorite cousins who lives in the U.S. told me a good friend of his lived in the Netherlands, and he lived about an hour walk from here. So I got into contact with that person, and I said, hey, why don't we meet and just have a drink or coffee or something?
Yeah.
And then the person was not clear of what the purpose of that meeting would be. And it was interesting because in a way, I also know I'm busy at times. I don't have much space. But in a way, since I'm walking 2 to 3 hours a day, I thought the purpose is to have a coffee. I think it took him a little bit of time to realize that there was the opportunity just to meet without needing any transaction in it. But I think when he got it, it was a little bit confusing and also refreshing. And so we met, and it was a really nice time. The funny part of it, I didn't tell you, was that we left, and then I went to the village he lived in, and we walked, and then we were saying goodbye, and then I said, no, I'm going to go into this. It was a Jewish cemetery. The first Jewish cemetery in the Netherlands was in this place. And he lives in the village and he'd never been to that cemetery. So then we spent the next half an hour walking through this cemetery together and just sharing that beautiful experience. And I think the beauty of it is that neither of us knew what that meaning would be, nor did it matter. But the beauty was, but there was a connection that was just beautiful in that moment. There was a lot of, I would see, reflection of one another. We could see each other in our stories, which just made it nice. And then not to need anything more made it even that much more beautiful, because there was that beauty of just, it was a moment that we could both share and enjoy. And we don't need to say, oh my God, now we're friends. Can we call each other? What are you doing on the weekend? It could just be a beautiful moment. Yeah. And I find that that's not easy to do often with men, at least in my experience in my 50s.
How many male friends do you have at this moment?
I don't know, Vamos. I think every time I move locations, I put out some types of signals to see who reciprocates, and I've made a couple of good male friends, and it always is a process that takes some time, I think. But I don't know. I don't know how many, Vamos. If I can think of 2 good friends in Amsterdam, that's already good for me. Good male friends. Yeah.
We have some comments.
It's good to have company. I like it.
Yeah, it makes it easier, I imagine, just to have a talk like we're in a bar together. Bolalong from South Africa is writing. He says, I connect better to women than men as friends as well. I am not a macho man and I don't care about sports and labels. So I think that that's probably something he identifies in us, obviously.
Bolalong, what are you wearing? Is it a bow tie?
In the picture, it looks like he's got something. I think that's a beard that he has growing there. And he also says, and I don't understand by the wording, he says, I've recently been proposed by a male friend.
For marriage, I assume.
From what?
For marriage.
No, because he is married. So he can't be proposed if he's already married. Or maybe it's a proposal for something more sexually, but we'll have to let him be more specific.
Yeah.
I've recently been proposed by a male friend. Even though we never pursued what he was suggesting, our relationship is much stronger now than before.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine as well.
I can identify with that directly. I have one of my closest friends, guy friends. Our friendship started out of a declaration of let's say of appreciation of more of a declaration of love, and we took that love and we transformed it into a trust and a friendship over time, and it's malleable.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I wrote about that story in the Wounded Healer, the book that I just did, the last book, which Rambus will raise up because that's what he does. I had a college friend who I lived with, and he was not out yet, and so we lived together, and he was in love with me, and I didn't know at the time. It was only years later he wrote and shared and I was of course stupid because he'd buy me perfume and things, and I just thought he was like the nicest guy. Like I didn't really think much of it then. But the thing is till today we're incredibly close because, as you said, there's a trust that builds up and I also feel like it's when you don't need to reject a person for the things that they are and for what they feel, because you can separate that from actually the loving friendship. And I think a lot of people who are especially like use the word homophobic just because that's an easy label to throw out, who have problems with their own femininity, whatever the word is, however you want to phrase it. That person has a harder time being with the individual because at some point they feel like if I allow them in, am I implicitly saying that I want more? Because they don't know how to deal with that boundary that you discussed earlier. So we became closer because I had no problem with the boundary, and I was just happy for him because I loved him, and there was no reason that he should suffer, right? Yeah.
I think the vulnerability that he expressed by saying that, by declaring it, is what a good friendship can start with. And I think that when I discussed with Bambos that I sometimes had hard time making friends with guys, is I think that is often what is lacking, is a vulnerable place to start with. I find that if you're faced with a crisis in life and you show that to someone else, they have seen you in your most vulnerable or in a difficult state, and I think they now know that that you can be trusted for them to show that state as well if it ever appears. It often is a difficult. It can be a difficult thing to know who you can talk to when it's dark or we're having more difficult thoughts, and I think that can be enriching, whilst also, I think, at the beginning at least, a bit scary for people.
Yeah.
I think in my own life, Yannick, also as a photographer, if I go into a company and I photograph individuals, like the journey that I invite them into is to be vulnerable, to, in a way, unmask and show themselves, because that tends to be the space of us being more authentic in the imagery that we capture, and then the images work as being relatable. And I've seen that the men who have been able to show themselves even reach out to me after the shoot, and a friendship is born. Like, we'll have breakfast together, and there's quite a few individuals right now that I've grown very close to because of that. And for them, even though they might not always be able to be vulnerable with me, I feel fully received when I'm with them, and I know it resonates for them, and they're just trying to find the way to that space. So it's very beautiful when it happens. And where I might feel uncomfortable still till today is if I'm in a male setting, like a men's group, and I see performance, and I'm very sensitive to that, and I see that I'm not always able, or it takes me time to embrace it in the other person, to just see it as that's where they are. Like, part of me wants to push it away, and the other part's like, okay, how can I embrace this, and how can I relax into it? Because in a way, it's also performing is also a tool, I would say, and they use that tool for whatever purpose in that moment, to protect themselves or identity or whatever.
Yeah,
I'd like
again,
to
back to
take that on, though, just quickly.
Yeah, please.
Because even using the word performance doesn't fully show compassion to where they are, in that they are.
This is the fine-tuning part, by the way.
They are suffering in their own little private Idaho, and that's the best that they can find at the moment for themselves, to be as vulnerable as possible. And yet, and I've noticed, at least in myself, if I judge them, then there's still part of me that is that, and I don't like that part of me. And when I don't judge it, it's like, oh yeah, I have full compassion because I'm not resisting any of that in myself, so I can fully be present for that in the other.
Yeah, I shared this, by the way, and I used the word performance because I didn't have a better word for it.
Okay, so but when you said it, I was following more the energy behind it.
Yeah, I said that I feel uncomfortable, but I wasn't judging it.
Oh, sweet. Okay. That's good.
So how would you?
I would only say, isn't it sad that we, and I'd speak in the we form, not this individual, that we at times aren't able to be vulnerable because we don't feel safe and secure in the environments?
And that's exactly what's behind that.
I would say so. And what had to happen to a person so that they didn't feel safe and secure? And then all my compassion is raised up, because now I'm only sitting with God. The more shut down, whatever the word we're going to use to describe a behavior, the more they must have had stuff happen, which makes it really hard for them to be fully vulnerable. Right. So I even say, the more somebody is, and I use the word now because we used it, performing, the more compassion I have for them, because there's something going on that they're not able to let their full vulnerability be shown yet. Yeah. Yeah. What?
Nothing. I thank you. There's a beauty in what you shared,
Uh-huh.
and it hits a part of me where I'm like, thank you.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
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 He just clicked something in my heart and my brain,
Yeah.
and I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe you can see something like that, but you might even be wrong, or uh, it might be sometimes the best thing to just accept or just let it be, or mind. Sometimes it's just best to mind your own business too. And I think that as very sensitive people, or as a person, sometimes you're overconfident in that you understand the situation, and I think that can also lead you, like, not everyone wants to dive as deep right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
And they don't
Yannick,
necessarily want you to mind that. Yeah.
my brother,
Yes.
I would describe him. He's emotionally not available, and
So all the Dimitrios out there watching
slow
right
down.
now.
And given his profession, I get it. He's a paramedic, and he sees a lot of death. He like limbs being cut. So in a way, when you're doing that job, you do need to shut down a part of yourself so you can stay focused and present and potentially save a life.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting emotional all the time, you let it in, and then how do you function? So I see that when I'm with him, if I share some silence with him and we do a bit of eye gazing and communicate love in that silence, he actually can go to his tears. And he's like, "You're trying to make me cry, aren't you?" And then he's like wiping his eyes.
Blaming you for how you make him feel.
So in a way, I can also see that being sometimes life conditions are a reason why people have
Yeah.
shut down in quotes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the first times I felt the depth of what a male relationship could be was when I lived in Japan. And in Japan, they have something they call Ishidenchi. I always forget if this is the correct pronunciation, but it's the thought that there's a capacity for one to have such an empathetic state that they can read one another's minds. And there was, and I learned a lot because, of course, if you see the movies, you see there's fewer things spoken because everything is so subtle and understood because of nuance, not because we've said it all in words. And when I left Japan, and I mentioned it before on one of the other shows, my dearest friend at that time, Hideki, we knew that this was going to be the last time we were going to spend all like that time together. And so for the last week of my stay there, he came and slept at my house. And it was like, because we knew that we were only going to have a week to be able to spend time near one another. And I mean, he had a girlfriend, Maki, who, we were all three of us were very close, and she was looking at the two of us like we should be put into an insane asylum. But it was like, for me, and still till today, it's one of the most beautiful things, because I felt, and I remember at the time saying, I'm not denying how hard it is for me to leave now. And even now I feel like I get emotional about it. And I want to not pretend and do the masculine, it's going to be easy, we'll deal with it, we'll see each other, all the words you say to pacify the pain of that loss. And that time he spent there was almost, for me, I would say, the full embrace of what it meant to leave him in that moment. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Do you think that an experience like this redefined what you saw as masculine?
I don't know, because what I've seen is that I've lived in something like 7 countries now for prolonged periods, and you as well. So what I know is that I adapt to my environment And it's hard to distinguish how much is it me evolving and how much is it the environment that I'm allowing to influence me, and now through that I'm interacting differently. So in a way, there was a sensitivity in Japan which taught me a lot about myself. And I was doing things before, but it was only when living there I understood. So I remember there was a story, and it's in the new book actually. When you get to it, it was a friend's brother died, and I ran onto the basketball court and I hugged him while he's playing in a game with people I don't know and he doesn't know, and I didn't care. I just ran up and hugged him quietly, didn't say anything, and then left. And that was just, and I did that at, I don't know, in my early 20s. And I would say that was a time I understood that love and affection is actually the greatest gift you can give another, because they'll feel their own pain through you creating space for them to feel it. So I knew it at 20, but I didn't live in a society like Japan, which allowed quiet to be so prominent in terms of an interaction. So there I began to see more how it showed up in real life, like how a society could allow spaciousness for emotions without everyone trying to fix or heal or tell people how they could make it better. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was yeah. The humorous to that is you also said that, being in a country, when you look in the eyes and you create connection, if you did that in Japan, everyone would move away from you because the eyes are the mirrors to the soul. So you never look at anyone in the eyes, of course. So in the connection there, using the eyes would be threatening. Yeah. Yeah. Because we know how powerful it is. So if there's that much power in it, and you live in a subtle energy, and you're looking at someone in the eyes, imagine where you're that open and feeling everything around you, and someone's piercing their eyes in yours. It's overwhelming. Yeah.
I did find that with my time in China, where I lived for 3 years, that the distance that is often kept between people isn't so much an emotional distance. It's more of a understanding of the body distance, where you don't need to have physical touch for everything. I'm all about it, but I learned to also have more the voice and the smile or the eyes express something that is, like, for example, I this always was so funny to me, but in groups, like people sort of wave at each other from further away and go like, "Hey, yeah." They're like, it's a different type of intimacy.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine who edits the books that I'm writing, and he's incredibly sensitive. He's a Mormon from Utah. Although that combo didn't make for a very good childhood upbringing, because they wanted a more macho child. So he sent me a video. He said, if you want to understand my life, Andy, watch this video. And for those who haven't seen it, it is an absolutely painfully hysterical video. And it's a video which is basically from Saturday Night Live, the TV show in the US on Saturday nights. And it's this thing called the wishing well. And it's a wishing well that it's a gift you give the child that's overly sensitive, and you fill it up with water so they can look in the wishing well and think about all their emotions. And so what it was pointing at all these sensitive kids who can't get into football and sports and the more masculine things. So he said, Andy, that was my life. So you have to look at it just to see it. If you're sensitive and you want to have a humorous glimpse on it, that would be it. Wishing well, Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
I'm a little bit quiet because when you shared your story with your friend, I mean, it's something that me and Andy are quite close, and it's something that I'm anticipating because, and first week of October, I'm going to Cyprus to explore what it's like to live there, and he's going to Spain. And and not only are we going to be apart, because Andy, I would say, is not only my mentor and coach, but he's also one of my best friends, and I love him. He's like family to me in a Western society where, you know, living in Holland, relationships are very different as to my culture. Sometimes a little bit more transactional, and with Andy, there's a love and a care, which I potentially didn't even get from my father. So I sometimes, and like the one thing that I find most difficult in me, even exploring Cyprus, is I'm not going to spend as much time with him, and it hurts.
So what do you do with that?
Oh, when he said his friend came and stayed with him, I'm gonna be with suitcase here like yesterday.
It's not a bad idea, and it's perhaps I find that when you said that, I felt it in some way too, that you will miss him, and it's a healthy reminder to appreciate people when we have them near us.
Oh, I told him last week I'm appreciating every day that we spend together doing this show.
I'm sure you shower him with love, no doubt.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the show in distance? Who's gonna keep the mic?
We're gonna have a little sabbatical, 3 months.
Yeah, we're gonna figure it out. There's so much change, and I noticed in myself when there's something new, this green field, then I don't want to be bringing old patterns into the new environment because I don't know who I'll be there. You know, maybe I'll be bored off my tit and I just can't do anything, but I need to do the show. Or maybe I want to spend the whole day farming, learning how to grow vegetables and learning Spanish and getting lost in a whole nother life and let that reshape me into something again.
Yeah.
And I find that the more space I leave for that, I can allow that to unfold in ways that might surprise me. And I like to reinvent myself. I find that if we think we're a certain thing and we try to reinforce it, then we just continually stay in one way of living and being, and life doesn't get as interesting. Yeah.
You can let the surprise fill your life there.
Yeah, with that respect, Andy's also leaving for Spain because he bought a house there. Yeah. So in a way, we're both exploring living outside of Holland.
Yeah, and interestingly, Bambos was the one who decided first. So Bambos says, I'm going to live outside. And then that kind of became another impetus for me to explore what life would be if I just went to another space to see what it might look like. So that became its own inspiration. Everyone was inspiring everyone else.
It could be interesting to do an episode where you discuss this sort of mindset of arriving to a new place with, I wouldn't say a fully blank slate, because what is that in the first place? But let's say the openness and the space to be surprised and to have that kind of openness as part of your beginning. And if you want to talk about something very more specific, such as learning languages, that's certainly one of my. I love languages, and I love filling my life with them. So that's, if you're going to be learning Spanish, we could talk about our successful or failed experiences learning Dutch. Nice. And yeah.
Well, I can tell you,
as I grew up in Mexico, I had to learn Spanish.
Oh yeah. I was going to say, we didn't get into something that I thought that Bombos might even be surprised I didn't get into. I had some time in Switzerland, and I didn't enjoy it. Let's just put it that way. So I was realizing that actually some of the experience, which I didn't ask you about, would be, how did the emotional shutdown nature of the Swiss people and culture affect you in terms of that? But we'll get into that on another show, just to offend everybody who's Swiss, and then jump away from it.
Call me officially offended. We can do we can do a session on cultural shocks and languages. That would be fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't hold my Swiss girlfriend's hand in public because public displays of affection were unacceptable. So
Wow,
we had to walk.
that must have been a long time ago, Andy.
It was a long time ago. It was 5 years we were together, though. 5 years. It was not an easy time.
Oh, it's changed now.
Yeah, I rest my arm on Ronnie so that she can carry me down the road.
Yeah, Nick, has it changed now in Switzerland?
Man, for me, I mean, we can cover this now if you want, but for me, I didn't know Switzerland. I left Switzerland when I was, I think, almost 9, and I came back to Switzerland during the summers at first to just revisit what I remembered from my childhood. And, you know, I didn't leave Mexico until 18. So when I was about 20 or 21, I had the chance to meet some locals who took me to the river. We had wine by the river, we swam in the river, and that led to new friendships there that allowed me to kind of get to know my own hometown from a new perspective. But that wasn't so obvious for me for so long. I don't think I know Basel very well. And so I gave myself the chance to rediscover it. So I think it's, for sure, Andy, you need to give a second chance to your experiences there.
Nice. Well, I'm married now, so I can't give it a second chance that way, or at least not that I know of. Bolalong says his discussions of A Wonderful Chaos gave him a feeling of relationship between Andy and Bambos. Obviously, we have the same, and I love them as we love him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Bolalong is our third wheel all the way in South Africa.
Yeah.
He's with us daily almost.
And I would say, if I'm honest, that having Bolalong there is very much a reason for me to be inspired to be here, because it's like unless there's a connection with the people that aren't with us, it kind of feels like, well, Bambos, we can talk. We don't need to be doing this on video, but sort of knowing that Bolalong is there and participating, and JC and Magdalena and Edith, we have a group of, I always laugh and say we're Oprah Winfrey to 10 people on the planet. So like there's this joy of being with people, which has made this journey on A Wonderful Chaos so beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for being with us. Yeah. And I think we can go out together because we've gone quite a bit over now. Or would you? No, we're not going to do that. I looked at his face. We're going to wait. We say goodbye to you. Thank you, Yannick.
For the first time, I was going to take the guest off.
Yes.
Yannick, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you.
Have a good one. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do we have tomorrow?
No idea.
Me neither.
We've got a good 25 shows or so going before we take off for our hiatus. So we hope that you join us. We love having you with us, and I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see you tomorrow on
A Wonderful Chaos.